teachers of Reddit, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? This happened to me as a pupil. A very quiet, unassuming kid in our class came into German with about 5 minutes of the class left. We went to a Catholic school and the teachers were all quite strict and intimidating. Classes were usually silent, especially in junior school. When this boy came into class at the end of the lesson that day, the door flew inwards with such force that the teacher gave an audible gasp. It had been raining heavily outside. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His blazer was dripping and sodden. He had mud caked into his trousers up to his knees, and he was breathing heavily. The teacher exclaimed, "Brendan, what happened?" We all stared up at him in shocked silence. This quiet, unassuming little boy let out a big sigh and just said, "I took a shortcut," and went straight to his seat. That line became iconic in our school 4 years afterwards. I love this story. The kid came in bad. A way too friendly taxi driver asked me and my sister why we were so quiet. Did anyone die? Yes, we are just on the way back from our dad's funeral. He didn't say a word for the rest of the drive. I was leaving the hospital, having picked up my mom's stuff after she died. The super friendly cab driver asked who I knew there, and I said my mom. He asked me how she was doing, and I told him she was leaving today, for the first time in over a year. Technically true. He was so happy for me. I could have said that she had died. I wasn't in denial or anything. It was her time. Had been for a while. But I knew that if I said that, his whole demeanor would change. And honestly, I liked the genuine happiness. I got to have the last light and fun conversation I would have for weeks. After you lose a parent, everyone walks on eggshells. He tried to set me up with his son, promising he was a good man. I'll never forget that ride. A kid missed my first period class one morning, but was in school later that day. When I asked him why he hadn't arrived in time for my course, he said his cow was birthing its calf that morning, so he'd picked being in the barn over English. Made sense to me. His essays weren't going to win any ribbons at the county fair, but his calf could. I was late to APBO because my goats had kids that morning. I feel like that should have counted for my grade. Edit. Thanks for the kind words and generous awards. My bio teacher was actually a neighbor and had been by my farm before, so I of course didn't get in any trouble. It's not a farming community, though, very suburban, so I was the only one in the school that could have used the excuse. We had an exam in my class and the teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. That student had been partying. Drives to school, takes off tire, punctures it, and bobs your Auntie Mary. When I was in college, my psych professor told us that the only excuse for being late was a funeral procession. Any other reason, you wouldn't be allowed to come in. A few weeks into the semester, I was headed from one building to another, which involved crossing the main road. Lo and behold, there was one very long funeral procession going by. I got a short video of it as proof, then stood on the sidewalk to let it go by. Unfortunately, the procession made me 5 minutes late to class. I knocked on the door, and the professor came over to start to tell me off. I showed her the video. Well, I'll be damned. Come on in. And then you could just save that video for any future professors like that use the video where the sun is shining bright while outside it is pouring like hell for extra credibility. God clearly smiled upon this procession. You should not only let me in, but give me an A for the entire class. Used to live and go to school in DC. My version of this was the presidential motorcades. Secret Service and police made you stop walking while it went by, so there was no getting through it if you got caught by one. It was cool/interesting the first few times. After a few months it became mildly annoying. I apologize that I'm writing this on mobile, so there might be errors. I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him, because he'd been a really good student. Then over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy, because they knew his van. Now, the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq, and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy, to beat the shit out of him, and get the safe back, because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper, and turned it in, apologetic that it wasn't up to his usual quality, but he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while he came very happy to my office hours, and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a meth den, shaking people down with baseball bats, and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigates counterfeiting, so the whole investigation happened because this guy, who I dubbed the White Shaft, tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. Edit 2. A couple people asked for more details, so here are a few more. I can't recall the year this happened, but it was the height of the war with the US and Iraq. My student had enrolled in the army right after 9/11 on the same day as his cousin. They were both just out of high school and enrolled due to patriotism and frustration. According to him, when he started his vigilante spree, he actually went inside of a house used by meth addicts to try and find the guy. They shook the house down with baseball bats and forced everyone out into the street. When the cops showed up, they told my student how dangerous this was and not to do it again. Then, they gave him their cards and said, "But call us if you do." They shook down at least 2 other drug dens, and the same cop was waiting outside both times to arrest people, since he didn't need to get a search warrant as everyone was outside now at the point of 2 baseball bats. I told my student how dangerous this all was, and he was very John Wick about getting his wife's wedding ring back. Also, I tried to find a link to the story, but it was a small story, and the Googles aren't being very helpful, especially since I can't remember the year. Again, thanks for the love and the gold, kind ones. MTV paid me $50 to fill my backpack with cement and carry it around for the day. I accepted that excuse. Student later regretted it, as a replacement backpack and college textbooks far exceeded $50. But he got his moment of fame and I didn't penalize him for his tardy. Gotta live a little. Edit. Someone found a newspaper article on this. Turns out it was $200. He earned $100 for the first day, and $100 when he returned the next day. I remembered $50, but it was 19 years ago. So I was right to believe him. He still lost all his stuff, thanks cement, and I remember him telling me it wasn't worth it. And edit. Typo. She had to take her sister to school and drive her mom to rehab. She was always late to class because her mom just wanted to sleep in. Problem was, if the mom was late or did not go, she would have violated her probation and gone to prison. I never marked her late. If she missed anything important she could come in at lunch or after school to make it up. You sound like an amazing teacher. Thanks for all that you do. I was the student. My neighbor had a really social goat and she figured out how to escape her pen in order to come over and hang out. She escaped and followed me to the bus stop, and when the bus came, she tried to follow me onto it. I couldn't actually get on the bus without her being right behind me, so I had to get off, bring her home, and call my dad to bring me to school. My neighbor had a really social goat is the best thing I've read today. Thank you, lol. Literally today, child missed my first hour class. Note said car accident on the way to school and would be coming late. Kid comes for second hour, has pictures on his phone of the rollover accident. WTF, kid, go home. Rest. Take care of yourself. Edit. I have another one, although this one happened to a classmate when we were in college training to be teachers. She missed a really important class, came for just the last 10 minutes or so, because her neighbor knocked on her door while in active labor asking for help a little while before she was supposed to leave for class. Classmate walked back to neighbor's house with Brigo neighbor and delivered her baby in the living room while on the phone to 911. Paramedics came and mom and baby were fine, but classmate needed to go home and shower/change first because she was covered in blood. Not school related, but my mom was in an accident where her car rolled and got totaled on the way to work. She said the trooper who gave her a lift had never in their life had someone ask to be brought to work after a car accident. And my mom took a selfie with the trooper. She worked her whole shift. Her only complaint was her coffee spilled when the car flipped. No injuries at all. Me. My bus hit a bird and the whole windshield was cracked. We had to wait for another bus to pick us up. Story time. I was the only high schooler on our school bus one winter. The other detail important to this story is that we had the oldest model bus that wasn't in the best mechanical shape. It had one of those mechanically operated doors. It would shoot out a plume of black smoke every time it started and just looked much less fancy than all the other buses the school had. Anyway, one winter it was so cold that the diesel engine stopped working. The bus driver said the cold made the diesel and the fuel lines gel up. I have no idea if that's accurate, but either way the bus wouldn't start. Fortunately we were only 5 miles from the school and all the kids had been picked up already. So they just radioed another, newer bus to loop back around and pick us up. The bus driver had radioed the elementary school, but completely forgot to let the high school know. So I show up to class and the teacher asks why I was late. I said, the cold caused the fuel lines to gel up in the school bus, repeating exactly what the bus driver told us. But I was the only high schooler on that bus, so no other students were there to back up my story. The teacher didn't believe me, and instead of just calling the main office to verify my story, she mocked me in front of the whole class, saying it's not possible for fuel to freeze in the cold. And everyone in the class agreed with her, saying that I was a bad liar and laughed at how dumb my story was. Ultimately the office did let her know about the bus after she tried giving me a detention, but the embarrassment is still there and she never gave me an apology. Open bracket.